Today I'm going to show you how I turn this into this. But before that, let's talk a bit about the Pwnisher challenges.
The Moving Meditations 3D Community Challenge. I am challenging you to put your passion to the test.
I tried to participate in the Infinity Journeys challenge. I spent a lot of time coming up with these great ideas. So much time on things that were absolutely unnecessary. That's probably the reason why I never finished the scene. I never made it to the deadline and just left the scene unfinished. When I heard about the Moving Meditations challenge, I told myself that this time I am definitely going to finish it before the deadline. I already had some good ideas of what I want to create. This time I wrote down the most important steps and challenges so I could tackle them first. I actually had some sort of a plan this time, and I was confident that I am gonna be able to finish before the deadline. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, so I decided to put Darth Maul in my scene. After trying different scenarios and environments for this shot, I finally chose the one that I liked the most. Here's the final result.
I do not desire peace.
You probably noticed all the glitches and missing frames. Lots of missing frames. I did finish 1 week before the deadline, but I totally forgot about one part: rendering. There was no way I was gonna be able to render this on my old laptop. I almost fried my friend's computer just to render out this many frames. I spent all that time and I ended up with something that I couldn't even render out. I couldn't submit an unfinished render, so I just gave up and left the scene like that. I thought I'd never be able to participate in any of these challenges. Until
It is time for another 3D Community Challenge. Our first ever 3D Vehicle Challenge. So starting today, starting right now.
oh boy, here we go again. With Endless Engines Challenge, I knew I had a chance to make something and actually submit it this time. I learned from the mistakes of the past. I knew it's not possible to render anything with cycles on my laptop. So I had to come up with a new idea, something that could actually work. I decided to make an anime style render, something that looks cartoony, totally non-photorealistic. So I can actually use Eevee this time to render it out. Knowing what style I'm gonna use, I started looking for ideas and inspiration. I recently watched the Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime. It was great. It had this amazing car chase scene and I was so inspired by it. So I decided to make a car chase scene with a cyberpunkish theme. So with that idea in my head, I launched Blender, opened up the starter file, and started messing around with it a little bit, just to see if the idea actually works. I came up with a quick preview and I thought it looked good, so I decided to carry on as planned. I went on Sketchfab and started looking for a good car model. And I found one. I got it imported into Blender and replaced it with the default car of the starter file. I really have to be quick because I only have 7 days to finish this, so modeling the assets for this scene is not really an option. For the road I used the highways kit from Kitbash 3D, and even the textures for the buildings in the background is from one of my older projects, so I could save more time. We'll get to that in a bit. After setting up the road and the vehicle models, we get to one of the most essential steps of making this NPR render: shading. For the purpose of this video, I am going to use this free model from Sketchfab to explain the shading process. By the way, most of the models that I used to set up the scene already had their textures set up and ready to go, so we're just gonna jump into cell shading. Let's start by removing the default principled BSDF node. Hit Shift A and then add a diffuse BSDF node. Shift A again and this time add the shader to RGB node. Connect the diffuse BSDF to shader RGB. Go on and add the color ramp. And connect the shader to RGB to the color ramp. Put the color ramp on constant and connect the color ramp to the surface of the material output. Play with the sliders until you get a result that looks like toon shading. Nice! Hit Shift A and add an emission node. Connect the texture to the emission. and connect the emission to the material output. Now mix the color ramp with the texture that goes into the emission shader, using Shift Ctrl right click drag. Now open the newly created Mix RGB node and set the blending mode to multiply and set the factor to 1. Now go back to the color ramp and now you can change the color of the shadows to a blue shade. Now I choose the car model, hit tab to go to the edit mode and select the headlights of the car. Go to the material tab, add a new material and assign it to the headlights. Copy the nodes that we just created for the car and paste it in this new material that we just created for the lights. Unplug the color ramp and choose a second color to mix with the texture. And turn up the emission, like a lot. In the render engine setting, just turn on bloom. And there we go, headlights are ready. I tweaked the color a little bit more. Done. So the shader is done, right? But I feel like I'm missing something. Outlines, of course, I totally forgot about them. In the object mode, hit Shift A, go to the grease pencil, add a stroke. Hit Tab, hit A to select all, and X to delete everything. Hit Tab again to go back to the object mode. Now select the car, hit M and move it into a new collection, and name it car, or whatever you like. Now choose the stroke, go to the modifiers tab, add a line art modifier. In the collection part, choose the car collection that we just created. For the layers, choose lines, and material, you can just choose black. Pretty nice, we got our line effects going on now. Oh, remember though, this effect only works from the camera's perspective. Alright, we're all done now. Wait a minute. I think I missed something again. Reflections, I totally forgot about them. Let's go back to the shader. Open up the shader, hit Shift A, and add a specular BSDF. Set the base color to black, specular color to white. Great! Now add the shader to RGB node. Connect the specular BSDF to shader to RGB. Shift A again, add a math node, set it to greater than. And connect the shader to RGB to the value of the math node. Now Ctrl Shift left click on the math node so we can actually see what we're doing. Play with the threshold until you get something you like. 2.7 works fine for me. We can mix them together. Now we got a new Mix RGB node. Open up the Mix RGB node, connect the reflection that we just created to the factor instead of the color. Set the second color as white. And that's it, we're done. Next we have the smoke and the sparks and the explosion at the end, which were all rendered in After Effects and imported into Blender as planes. You can make the similar effects inside of Blender, but I recommend you render them first and then import them back in as planes. That way it's just way more optimized. I use the particle systems for the explosions and the sparks on the car, just to make them spawn at the right time. Same goes for the traffic in the background, just a collection of low poly vehicles and particle system to create that. It's definitely not the best way to do it, there's probably many better ways to do it. But I think it serves a purpose, and this method just gets the job done, especially if you don't want to spend much time on it. Next, we have these white lines. I don't really know what to call them. We've all seen these in many animations. They just give this great sense of speed. Let's take a look at the shader for this effect. First of all, we apply this shader to a cylinder, which covers the whole world. Here we go. We have an emission node and the transparent BSDF connected to a mix shader. Then we have a noise texture with a mapping and texture coordinates. The noise texture is connected to a color ramp, which goes into the factor of the mix shader. You can play with the noise texture and the color ramp to achieve the lines. And to move them, go to the mapping, location, in Z-axis we enter #frame/100. You can change the speed just by changing the number from 100 to whatever you like. And that's how you achieve this effect. So next we have the buildings in the background. For the texture of these buildings, I just grabbed a couple of images of buildings and cities and took them to Photoshop. I did some photo bashing and I applied some effects to make them look more stylized and painterly. Then I just exported the final result as a PNG. Inside Blender, I made a cube and used the PNG as a texture to project onto it. You can start modeling and adding more details. Just extrude and bevel to create different shapes. You can use an array modifier to get as many buildings as you want. You can also use a hue and saturation node to get buildings with different colors, although they are all using the same texture. And that was pretty much how I made this. And yes, I finally got to submit it. I'm really glad that I got to be a part of this challenge, alongside all of these great artists. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Until next time, goodbye.